Welcome to Third and Fairfax. It's the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. SAG-AFTRA's interactive media agreement, which covers video game performers, expired in November of 2022. On July 26, 2024, after 18 months of negotiations with some of the industry's largest video game companies, SAG-AFTRA members called a strike. Today on the podcast, WGA West member and host Myles Warden is joined by SAG-AFTRA Chief Negotiator Duncan Crabtree-Ireland and Interactive Media Negotiating Committee Chair Sarah Elmaleh for an update on the strike and to learn more about the core issues that SAG-AFTRA members are fighting for. And now, here's Myles.
Can you both introduce yourselves for me, please?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Duncan Crabtree-Ireland. I'm the National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA, and really excited to be here talking to you about our video game strike alongside our amazing chair of our negotiating committee.
That's me. Hello, I'm Sarah Elmaleh. I am chair of SAG-AFTRA's Interactive Media Agreement Negotiating Committee. I am a performer and performance director for video games. I also do work other contracts, but games are my love, my joy, my passion, my purpose.
Incredible. Thank you for joining me on the WGA podcast, Third and Fairfax. Appreciate you so much. Before we get too far into your campaign for a fair contract, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves, Sarah, starting with you and your experiences as a video game performer?
Yeah, absolutely. I have been working in games probably since 2011, and have been a full-time voice actor since around that time, 2011. So from the my career as a professional, games have been a part of the entire time. I've loved games since I was tiny, growing up, and have focused on them creatively for almost as long. I also voice direct as well, games mainly. I do work other categories as well, live action dubbing, commercials, things like that. So I have some diversification there, but games have been my focus for a really long time. Games that you might have played with me in them, Fortnite, let's see, what else? God of War, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Gears
Just
5.
tiny little games like that, Sarah, huh?
Yeah.
Unknown games like
games
Fortnite,
too.
God of War.
Games of all time, if you played video games ever in your life.
Yeah, games of right, and yes, and in some cases, in more noticeable ways, and sometimes I'm just getting beaten up by Spider-Man, which is a joy and an honor. So, so a range of games and small games too. I started in indies. I love indies. I champion our indie contracts like heck, and so I really do run the gamut there.
That's incredible. So, what led you to become the chair of the negotiating committee?
I was actually, it was our indie contract, actually. I don't know if you want to get are we just like tabling Duncan for
We'll get back to me. Don't worry.
Okay. So, through working on our indie contracts, actually, when I joined our union, I didn't see as a contract that was really tailored to smaller games. And so, and this was right around the last time we struck this contract, the Interactive Media Agreement, 2016. And so I wanted to carry that into being, I intended to join our union. I was excited to become a union member, but I wanted to keep this piece because of my heart, because I love indies. So that was my early contributions to our committee. I was not even on committee, but I was helping kind of tune our low budget agreement for games at the time, using my relationships with developers and kind of bringing input into the crafting of that contract. I was asked to join the committee after that strike resolved. And then I was asked to be chair in 2022, maybe 6 months or more before we started negotiating this term, which we've been doing since then.
Awesome. And now for you, Duncan, as well, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? You are the executive director and the chief negotiator for SAG-AFTRA, and can you tell us how you got to this position as well, and also a little bit about the interactive media agreement in general?
Sure. Well, so my name's Duncan. I've been with the union for over 24 years. I started back in the year 2000 as a staff attorney in our legal department. So my background is as a lawyer. I've been the national executive director and chief negotiator since 2021. Before that, I was the general counsel and COO of the union for about 15 years before that. And and I'm also an avid gamer, I have to say, myself. So I own just about every console you can imagine, and so do my kids. And so, although I will say, Sarah, with respect to Fortnite, I've played Fortnite many, many times, but it's not my strength to play those types of games because
Mine
my
either.
coordination. No, so my kids, I usually play with my kids, and they have to protect me in order for me to survive long enough to really make a dent in either Fortnite or Overwatch, for that matter. But there are other games that I excel in, and I enjoy them all. And so as far as this contract goes, I mean, my colleague Ray Rodriguez, who's our chief contracts officer, is really the lead negotiator of this contract. I'm working alongside him on it. My role as chief negotiator applies to all of our contracts, but this one is has been under Ray's careful attention, and he's an extraordinary negotiator. And this contract is all about the video games. It's called the Interactive Media Agreement, but what that basically means is video game contract, and it is a contract with the biggest video game studios and companies, well, in the world, but also in the U.S., many of them. But I will note that we also have indie video game agreements, and independent tiered agreement, as well as a interim agreement that has been in place since we've been on strike. And we have some incredibly important and big video game companies signed to those agreements, as well as companies and developers across the range of budget levels. And so this is a complex industry. I think sometimes people who don't know that much about video games don't realize, first of all, what a huge industry it is. It's as big or bigger, really, than the film and television industry in terms of gross revenues. And these companies are, very aggressive in protecting their turf. And it has, we've actually been on strike more in this contract than we have in, I think, just about any other. We had a strike in 2017. We obviously are on strike now. This strike has lasted longer than the TV theatrical strike did in 2023. And it's all about AI. And we are really fighting for the protection of our performers' futures, our members' futures, working in this part of the industry. And that's why we're so committed to this fight. And that's why we are so absolutely laser focused on getting a fair contract that addresses their needs as far as AI goes.
And what would you say the core issues facing performers in the video games contract are right now that is holding up a fair contract?
Well, it is AI. I mean, that is literally the only issue. I mean, one distinction out from the, your listeners who might have been more familiar with the TV theatrical strike in 2023, there were multiple issues that caused that strike to happen. AI was one of them, and it was a big one, but it wasn't by any means the only one. In this negotiation, Sarah and the negotiating committee and our staff negotiators, we were able to narrow those issues. So really, the only remaining substantive issue is AI. That's what the strike is about. That's what's holding up a deal. And it's the lack of a willingness, frankly, from my point of view, to agree to basic principles of respect and fairness in handling performers' engagement with AI. That is what's holding this whole thing up. And I'll absolutely, of course, defer to Sarah, who brings a performer perspective to what that's all about and what that feels like.
Yeah, I mean, we across SAG-AFTRA, our position is that the use of this tool can be ethical and properly consenting, kind of a mutual step into the use of this tool to create new, interesting experiences. If certain things are in place, if transparency is in place, if you're forthcoming about the kind of use that you're envisioning for this tool vis-a-vis this actor or performer, and that transparency extends to how you wind up using it, and as well that you're properly compensated for the value that this new expression is built off of, and so those are the kind of tentpole elements of our AI proposal, and then getting into those details is where we've been fighting in the trenches, essentially, in the bargaining room for a long time now, and so some of these bigger companies, I think it's not. I don't think it's a stretch for anyone to kind of imagine that these companies see people as just the material that they're printed on, essentially, that they have, and their position is that they have the right to do whatever they want with it. And we as workers understand that our work has value, that as human beings, we need safe working conditions and all these other things that they're ready to blow past and just focus on whatever they make out of you. And so getting deep into the weeds about what that looks like and what it means is kind of where we've been. I think that's, without getting into those weeds, that's the overview.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we also had our issues with the AI in our contract when we were dealing with our strike as well. So they sound very similar in many ways. You've both mentioned these companies. Who exactly is on the other side of the bargaining table during these negotiations?
We have, well, who exactly is, do you mean like the companies themselves, or who from those companies?
Oh, wait.
We have, let's see, Activision, we have 2K, or is it Take-Two? Take-Two, actually, parent company Take-Two. We have Formosa, we have Blindlight, we've got Disney, we've got WB, whose names you will recognize from, last year's strike as well. We've got Insomniac. There's 9 of them. I should be able to rattle these off. Who might I be missing?
Did you say EA? I can't remember what you said.
I did
EA.
not say EA.
Yep.
Hilariously, I feel say EA. And then as far as who's bargaining, we have a mix of, all of those companies. Just to kind of give you a picture, those are very different companies from each other. Some of these are very large publishers. Some of these are individual developers. Some of these people don't even make games, but have, a contractual foothold in the space, whatever that might be. And so these are all kind of folks with different interests, and then different folks with different levels of authority or touch point to this process representing those interests in the room. So you have some talent coordinators who work with us all the time and understand the value of our collaboration and what magic is possible when we actually do work together as human beings. And then you have IP lawyers who are just kind of like, what's games? Huh? What are you trying to do here? And those folks, all these folks have different levels of decision-making power within those companies. So it really is complex.
Makes a lot of sense. And it's
can I just add them also, if it's okay? And I think the other point to make is there's a whole bunch of companies, including really big, important companies that are outside of that bargaining group, but who have signed off on the principles that we're asking for. So, a big one that we've talked about is Lightspeed LA, which is a AAA game studio, on par with any of the biggest game studios that you could have, pull from that list that Sarah just mentioned. And, one of the things that I find really striking in a negative way about this situation is the fact that the principles we're pursuing are the same exact principles we pursued with the studios, the streamers, the record labels. All of those companies got on board, and a whole bunch of more video game companies have gotten on board with what we're looking for in terms of our interim agreement or our tiered independent agreements, then are fighting us on it. And yet these companies that do have a key place in the marketplace are just like dug in refusing to acknowledge these basic principles of fairness. And it's unfortunate and really frustrating.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I don't know if just to speak to that, I think something like 10 times the number of, as far as teams making these games, teams that are like, this works for our process. This doesn't hold us up at all as a business interest, much less like a moral or a creative one, right? 10 times the number of as far as of companies, of people who make games, as there are specific companies that are, having their voice in this process at the bargaining table.
The only way to resolve these things is through those types of conversations. I personally feel that in addition to the bargaining group that we're dealing with, that the CEOs of these companies need to get involved, just like they had to get involved during the TV theatrical strike, because I feel like there's some kind of obstructionism going on the AI front that requires sort of senior executive involvement to sort of clear this underbrush that's holding them back from embracing the basic principles that are necessary to engage in a fair way with creative talent. And I do personally believe it's going to harm these companies long term if creative talent get the impression, which is very easy to get from the way they're behaving, that they don't really care about the creative talent, and all they want to do is sort of squeeze the creative juice out of you and then toss you aside. That is not the way for any company that expects to be successful long term to deal with the creative talent that work for them. And by the way, it's their only competitive advantage against AI companies that want to, use algorithms to replace people, because none of these companies are going to be better at that than the AI companies. What gives them a competitive advantage is their relationship with human creative talent who can bring something that can never be replaced by those algorithms. So I really hope they come to their senses and realize that soon, because their recalcitrance is causing a lot of harm to people, putting people out of work. And it's unnecessary. Like Sarah said, they could agree to every single proposal we have on the table with zero negative impact to their bottom line or their business. And it's some sort of hubris about AI that seems to be blocking it.
No, those are some really good points. And it is really sad during negotiations like this that it does seem that we are trying to help them help themselves. And they are so many times so short-sighted that they don't see the long-term effects that these things will have on themselves in their own businesses. And you mentioned some of the effects that this strike is currently having on your own performers. Can you speak a little bit about what effect that the strike is having on the companies?
Let's see. I mean, as far as I can only kind of go a little bit by hearsay, I think that there have been some delays and some reshuffling, which is the kind of disruption that you hope for. We have a unique situation in this industry, and then in our contract, which is another branch of the tree that leads into weeds. That does mean, I think, that our pressure tends to have a bit more of a delay effect in general than in TV and film. When you talk about production in a game sense, there's a lot of other pieces, but principal production, it doesn't necessarily mean recording actors. That there's a lot of things to build in a game and to get going and to test and to improve beyond actors in it. Now, that being said, depending on where you are in that process, actors not providing you with the performances you need to kind of continue to build could be quite disruptive, and that has hit immediately in some cases. In other cases, they're able to focus on something else until they can get back to recording actors. So that is the kind of delay. I think there's a longer term picture of how our pressure continues to escalate over time, actually, in this category compared to maybe other categories. So yeah, I think that right now, they've been, some companies have been disrupted immediately. Others have attempted to shuffle things around and see if they can wait this out. That waiting is what I think is going to, just as a guess, again, completely speculating here, but predicting here, that it will be more difficult. That pain will be felt in the coming months. And then I think there will in fact be a third phase as well after that.
But I think they may also be underestimating the long-term impact on their business of the relationship damage that they're doing with performers who have had a lot of loyalty to these companies. I mean, I'm struck by my conversations with the members of our union, including the leaders of our negotiating committee, about the loyalty they have towards the companies that they've worked with for a long time. And then when those companies don't display any sort of seeming appreciation for the commitment and the talent that these performers have brought to them, I think that has a relationship impact, because this is not just a transactional business. This is not just a business about, Venmo some money and that's the end of the story. This is a business about creativity and long-term creative relationships. So I really think that some of these executives are underestimating the long-term consequences of taking these positions.
I think game actors really, we so many of us love this work and love these games and do this work because of that. And so, and we love I love collaborating with game devs and sort of troubleshooting and problem solving creatively in the booth during this process. And I see us as a team, and I cultivate that when I direct. And so I think it is sad for me to see the shock and rage and frustration from members when they realize that the lines are drawn in this way, and folks that they thought, or rather that the people they work with are great and want the best for them, and there are people they never talk to or see that are willing to throw them under a bus. And I think that is kind of an awakening that's happening. That is necessary for the energy to have an action like this, but it's always sad to see, because I think this community is very flexible and versatile and game. There's an immense amount of trust that you put into this process already. You go into a booth or a performance capture volume with less preparation and less advanced notice or script material than almost anything else. And you show up and you say, hey, sounds great. What are we doing today? That's how this category works. And so already we're giving our creativity and our flexibility, our versatility to this process in this really beautiful, trusting way. It's the thing I'm most moved by as a director when I see it from actors there. They're just willing to kind of create characters on the fly and go with, and provide different options because they can't see what's going on in the game. They're only reacting to their own imagination and trusting you to guide them. And so the betrayal of that trust in this process by not allowing the extension of that communication through the use of this tool when you're not there, when you're not part of that process in person, is immensely frustrating. It feels like a real betrayal given how trusting we are already.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. And what other ways outside of withholding your work would you say the union is exerting pressure on these video game companies to get back to the table and try to solve this thing?
Our interims are a big part of this. I mean, I think we really, in addition to withholding work, we're creating safe work. And we're trying to kind of disprove this distorted view that these companies control the entire industry, because they are significant and meaningful for sure in this space, but they're not everybody. We've got large companies, as we said, we've got small companies. We're working on agreements that expand even further into folks day one, brand new developers, getting used to the joy of working with union talent and getting used to what that process looks like in terms of making that work for your project. And so we are very aggressive and open. Our door is open to everybody in terms of people who make games to have discussions about how this works. If they've never worked with a union before, what that's like, to answer questions, to create business, and to demystify and smooth that process for anybody who wants to collaborate with our actors and give them exactly what we're asking for, only what's fair.
Can either of you tell me a little bit more specifics about your interim agreements as far as like how they prove the things that you are fighting for can work, and some of the things the details that are in there?
I mean, they wouldn't sign if there were obstructions to how business is done, then companies would not sign them.
Yeah.
But they're saying this doesn't disrupt our process. We're happy to extend that to you, to tell you what we're going to do with your, if we decide to use this tool at all, which many of them aren't. And if they are, then they're like, oh, that seems totally fair. I'll tell you what we're going to do with it and we'll pay you. This is fine. And so every company that signs these contracts proves that the idea that this is somehow impossible to do or to comply with is inaccurate and untrue. And so that's really encouraging to see. And it bears out what we had always thought was the case and why we've been advocating for these protections in the first place.
And I feel like the motivation to sort of not agree, like the ones who sign the interim agreement, what they are agreeing to is they're agreeing to sort of basic principles. Like, for example, if there is, if they have a repository of past work from performers, that they'll get consent from those performers before they use it to replicate them in future projects. I mean, that shouldn't be controversial. That should be obvious. And yet the other companies who are holding out are refusing to accept that principle. And, so from my point of view, one of the ironies is I don't think they're actually going to do a lot of that for a variety of reasons, but they want to be able to do that. And the fact that they want to be able to do it and they refuse to agree not to is it's just shocking, really, when you think about it. It kind of lines up with some of the worst things that were said in the TV theatrical negotiations. And I do think, in addition to what Sarah said there, I mean, there's these companies across all budget ranges, they have they are actively producing games under these contracts right now with not one single problem as a result of it. Mm-hmm. So this doom and gloom or whatever it is that these, the companies in the bargaining group are citing to their shareholders and to their stakeholders, like their customers and stuff, to explain why they're doing this, it just doesn't hold water. It just doesn't.
That makes a lot of sense. So what ways can us WGA members and anyone listening help support you guys during the strike? Are there more pickets planned? What else can we do to support?
Write some funny picket signs for us. How about that?
Yes, uniquely talented in this.
We're so amazing. I mean, I still think back on some of those things and think, oh my God, the creativity of WGA members is unparalleled. It is
truly,
yeah. No, in seriousness, Sarah, I'll defer to you on that.
No, so inspiring. I mean, that's what I was going to say. I've seen your members at our pickets as well as at our games pickets as well, and it's just so energizing and so appreciated to have your presence there, to add your solidarity to ours. It's really meaningful. So yes, we are going to spin pickets back up again. I think there are maybe folks in our industry or adjacent industries that aren't aware that this is happening, or it's still happening. So just listening to this podcast and getting educated that this is happening still, that the issues on the table are still as shocking and egregious as you can imagine, really. I mean, I think Duncan's point about past material is so nuclear that it's worth pointing out that even the protections we're currently bargaining over would be moot when applied to, performances given the day before ratification is obscene. And so, education and sharing information and solidarity is all amazing. Doing videos about it, talking about it, just posting about it, and sharing that info with other professionals and creatives in the space is really meaningful. Am I missing something, Duncan?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess the other thing I would just say is, WGA members have a unique platform, a lot of them, because they are, a lot of them, active in social media. And really, they have a unique way of engaging, which I think we all collectively benefited from in the TV theatrical contract. So should any WGA members be interested in, helping us amplify our message, it would be super welcome. And I would just point out that really this is a fight that we're all in together, because the principles that we're fighting for are really the same principles the WGA was fighting for in 2023 and us alongside. And what we're all going to need to have protected as we move forward, whether your work is threatened by an LLM or whether it's threatened by a transformer, it's the same fundamental challenge, which is human creativity needs to be cherished and protected. And I think our unions are all here to do that. And so, if there's any WGA members who want more information, we have a ton of it on our website. We welcome you speaking out in whatever way you want, and we would certainly appreciate any amplification of the message, because we're in this fight to protect your fellow creative talent. That's what we're all about. So we'd appreciate that.
Very true. I'm sure you will have our support, and we will write as many funny signs as you guys need.
Bless. So
Thank
good.
Funny
Iconic. Historic.
We
truly.
had some funny signs on our picket line, but I have to say I have joined you guys a few times on your picket line, and you guys have had amazing costumes. So now I'm going to ask you, what is like the best costume, or have you seen a costume of a character you've played, voice actor of? Like, what's your favorite zany thing you've seen on the picket line?
Someone comes in at like a green screen suit, and that always brings me joy. And I think speaks to something really important actually about the nature of the fight that we're having over AI, is that we are the idea of recognizability plays a lot into kind of the standard of who gets protected, and our work is really joyfully collaborative with each other. Like, we share characters. I'm sharing I only found out this year that I share a character with another committee member who did my stunts. It's a guy. I was like, what? That's awesome. You took my falls. Thanks. Cheers, bro. You know what I mean? And so we all are kind of, combining with other performers. We're transforming ourselves. We have people who do incredible things with their voice to create creature noises and all sorts of stuff. We're transforming ourselves completely in some cases, and combining with each other, our powers with each other. And I think that is such a special opportunity in this space. I don't need to look like what I voice. That can be someone else. Like, you can really kind of build the best possible version of these characters by combining our efforts. And that is, one of the excuses that they're giving not to acknowledge that we all have a right to these protections in terms of, I'm being replicated. Like, the question of who's being replicated is still an issue. And it's unfortunate because we have thrown ourselves generously into the nature of this process, and now they're using it to justify not protecting anybody, and it's obscene. So that kind of costume makes me kind of think that way, of like the humility and sort of open the kind of blank canvas that we as game performers often bring in service to these projects. Yeah,
it's all very collaborative, like you mentioned. So that we definitely have to fix these issues. It affects us all, from fans to the workers, to their businesses. It's very terrible. So one more lighter question. So you both mentioned you're fans of video games and have been playing video games a long time. What game are either of you playing now, and or what is your favorite game ever?
Ooh, Duncan, you go first.
No. Gosh, I mean, what is my favorite game ever is super hard to say. And I play a lot of different types of games. So I guess I would say one game I really like now. So I play a lot of mobile games because of the nature of my work. So right now there's a mobile game I like called Root that I've been playing a lot of. There's in terms of console games, it may seem a little basic, but I really have to say I love Hogwarts Legacy, and I've been replaying that one recently. And for the holidays, I was given, at my suggestion, as a Christmas present, a Steam Deck. So I've been in the process of deciding what games I want to put on my Steam Deck, because that's mobile enough that I can take it with me in a way that, like, it's hard to take a gaming laptop with you alongside a work laptop, like when you're on a work trip. So something like Steam Deck is, it's right on the borderline of portable enough for me to do that. So I'm kind of excited to try that. So yeah, and then on occasion I will play like Fortnite, Overwatch, mainly to play it with my kids. And also God of War, actually, Sarah, is one that I've spent quite a bit of time playing.
Really?
So,
well, when you get to a certain library, there's a very stern librarian waiting for you.
I think I know what you're referring to. Okay.
Oh, really? Hey, that's me. Don't take my books.
Okay.
Yeah. So apparently that's a very difficult boss fight. So I wish you the best.
Thank you.
But yeah. And we should talk about Steam games. I gave Zeke a whole rundown. This is one of our fellow committee members. A rundown on my favorite Steam games. So I will
Yes,
give you
definitely
that
will.
list
We'll do
after.
that. Absolutely.
I have been playing. Well, my favorite game ever. I have a few. I think I will pick the earliest game that kind of put a light bulb over my head about voice in games, performing in games, and that would be Curse of Monkey Island, the Curse of Monkey Island, which is the third in the Monkey Island series. It came out. I'm going to date my age, but it came out at a time when I was in middle school, and I was playing. I was playing in my mom's basement, and the performances in that game were so inspiring to me. Dominic Armato as Guybrush was just like wry and funny and dry and silly, and just kind of had this everyman quality that was so winning, and so I loved that. Or even Full Throttle before that, actually, with Mark Hamill, sounding very unlike Luke Skywalker, and I was obsessed with Star Wars as a kid, so sounding, doing a kind of a plummy, almost Tim Curry-esque villain was like a mind blower to me. So both of those games really inspired me to think about games performance and the intimacy of that as a medium, like the idea that you are spending hours the intimacy of interacting, that you can actually poke at these characters and have them talk back at you is really special. And that I felt that instinctively as a kid, and I believe in it now as an artistic principle. What am I playing? I'm playing UFO 50. I have another podcast. This is an accidental plug. It's called Eggplant, The Secret Lives of Games, and it is a game design podcast. It's me and like 6 other academics and game designers and whatnot. Usually we have interviews with other game makers about their process. And this year we are doing an episode a week on every game in the collection of 50 games. So it's a whole year. Yeah, it's a lot to keep up with. But it's amazing. It's a fantastic collection that came out last year. And if you like games and you want to, think more about how they're made and how the decisions are made when making them, that's what we do over there. So that is, that's all I can do right now. It's the only game I'm going to play for like a year. So yeah.
What did you say the name of that podcast was again?
Oh, it's called Eggplant, The Secret Lives of Games. That is a reference to Spelunky, for those who know. It has nothing to do with the emoji. It is just...
I was wondering that, Sarah, but I wasn't going to ask you. I wasn't going to ask you on air.
I hate that I have to clarify that. But yes, it's a reference to Spelunky, which is a great game, if you know it, and a reference to the idea of these secrets and little hidden choices and hidden discoveries in games.
Well,
for context.
And Myles, can I just say, only so that I don't get in trouble with our communications department, that I also therefore have to plug the SAG-AFTRA podcast, of which I am a host. And we also have a podcast in Spanish, which for any of your listeners who might be bilingual or speak Spanish, the SAG-AFTRA podcast in Español is a really great podcast also. I happen to be a co-host of that also. So if anybody is just in desperate need of more podcasts to listen to, I recommend both of those as well. They're fun and interesting, I think. So. But if it were me, I'd maybe start with the Eggplant, the Hidden Life.
Oh.
I am going to. I'm going to add that to my podcast subscriptions, like as soon as we get done recording this one.
Oh my goodness!
Same here. Is there anything else either of you two would like to add before we close this out?
Only thank you for taking interest in this strike. I know that obviously we have a great relationship with the WGA. We really appreciate your support, and we're always trying to always be there for you as well. But I know that helping us get the message out about this, it means a lot, because this is something we're really passionate about, and because of the nature of the industry, it hasn't gotten the same level of public attention that the TV theatrical strike did. But the issues at play are just as important. The performers' lives are just as impacted, and frankly, the cause is just as righteous. So thank you for helping us, bring some additional attention to it.
Yeah. So many people who don't think of themselves as gamers per se and don't see that as an axis of their identity play games. We live in a world where people play games.
Absolutely.
And so, I think connecting with who makes them is what, unions are about, is, appreciating what the human literal effort and in some cases bodily risk and certainly creative risk that we take to make these lovely experiences for people. So connecting that conversation across all of our channels is impactful and appreciated. Thank you.
Well, we are very happy to support you both, and thank you both for coming and giving us all of that great information. Happy to share it along with everybody in the next picket. I will be on the lines with you guys. Looking forward to seeing those funny costumes and out there. It's so great. So we're wishing you all the best in these negotiations.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. If you like this episode or have a comment, email us at podcast@wga.org. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. And see you next time.